Okay, welcome to the buy and debate with the Bourgogne Wine Council, the BIVB. Today we're going to be looking back on 2020, looking ahead into 2021, and looking at all the various different issues that there were for different kind of wine companies and wine importers, wine producers last year, and also shining the spotlight obviously on Bourgogne and the various different trends and how the region coped and fared during 2020. So over the course of the next hour, I'm very happy to be joined by our illustrious panel. So if I can introduce you all quickly just to say hello to you. So we have Justin Gibbs, who's one of the co-founders of LiveX, one of the key marketplaces for fine wine. Nicholas Clerc, who's the wine buyer for Armit Wines, and we have Hugues Lepin, who's the private client director at Wine Source, Omar Rafat from Bibendum Wine, who is director of their fine wine sales, and representing Bourgogne, we very pleased to welcome Louis Fabrice Latour, who obviously a very prestigious producer in their own right, but as also the president of the BIVB. So thank you for all your time for joining us today. So perhaps, if you don't mind, if you just sort of quickly, if I just go around and ask you to just in your own words sort of say how you would describe your company, and then just perhaps put in context what Bourgogne means for you. It's always very interesting to hear how people describe their own businesses rather than outsiders describing what they do. So, Justin, perhaps if I come to you first, if you could just give people a moment on LiveX and what you do, basically.
Thanks, Richard. Well, we're probably a bit unlike everyone else in this panel. Imposters, perhaps. LiveX began 20 years ago. And the aim was to establish, I suppose, to utilize the internet and the connectivity that it brings to establish a marketplace for wine merchants, wholesalers globally. We are 20 years on. We have 500 merchant members in 44 countries. The split is roughly a third UK, a third Europe, and a third the rest of the world. And what we do is we provide the software through which they can transact, buy and sell wine. We set the rules around engagement, so the contracts against which they're trading. We then settle those trades anonymously through a network of warehouses in Bordeaux, Beaune, Brussels, and Hong Kong. And London, of course, which is the central hub. And then the result of all this activity of these 500 merchant members is that we create an enormous amount of transaction-based data. And that data set is now, after 20 years, runs to 755 million lines and grows at nearly 1 million lines now a fortnight. And with that data, we then provide insights and share that with our merchant members. So I suppose in many ways we're considered to be, we are a fine wine or a wine marketplace, a global wine marketplace, but we are also, we are data led. We are totally independent. We're not allowed to transact ourselves. We're not allowed, there can be no conflict with our members. So we are used by our members to find a market and then to perhaps analyze that and share the data around that.
Brilliant. Okay, and obviously, I guess Bourgogne being such an important region for the whole world in terms of fine wine and well, just wine in general, really. I mean, I guess you have a very able to provide quite an independent perspective on you as well in terms of the trends.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I suppose we'll get into those over the course of this conversation. Yes, the point. I mean, the point the important word there, Richard, is independent. I mean, we have no skin in this game from a commercial, perspective. Well, of course, we sell our data. That's where we make our crust. But we are entirely independent of the action is set by the merchant members who transact through the platform.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. Omar, can I come to you and give your view on Bibendum and where Bourgogne sits within your portfolio?
Absolutely. Good morning, Richard. Nice to see you and everybody else. So I work with Bibendum Wine. I'm the fine wine director at Bibendum. We are an importer and wholesaler, supplying on-trade and off-trade. So everything from national and regional on-trade establishments through to multiple retail, off-trade and independent retail. So we cover all of those bases, and so in that sense, everything that we sell is everything from very bulk generic for be that off-trade or large pub groups, through to what I do in the fine wine division, which is selling top producers and Grand Cru wines to top restaurants. We don't do anything directly into private clients, although we do work with our Walker and Woodhouse division, which is selling to independent retailers and brokers. So there is an element there through to the private client market, although we don't work in that directly. Bourgogne as a region is very important for us in the sense of both the sales that it generates. In particular, Chablis is huge in the on-trade, but actually across the entire region. We'll get into that, I'm sure, a bit later about sort of which regions work particularly well in our sector. And and the rest of Burgundy is also very well represented. But yes, the main thing that we are is a wholesaler and importer. So.
Okay, well, we'll come back and talk a bit more detail about how those sales and what kind of demand you're seeing coming through from the different channels. Hugues, can I come to you? Perhaps talk us through Wine Source for those who may not know you and where Bourgogne sits within your portfolio.
Of course. Good morning, everyone. But first of all, for us, it's probably the youngest company that we have represented on the panel of people that we have around. We only a 10-year-old company, so very young company, based in London mainly. We are a wine merchant in London, advising on-trade as well as private individuals, private customer. For many years at the beginning, it was nearly 70 to 80% of on-trade, so top hotels, top restaurants in London, and developed slowly after a few years to private individuals. Now we have offices in the US as well. We have offices in Bordeaux as well. So quite a developed company. And when we come back to Bourgogne, Bourgogne is essential for us. It's probably from the beginning, the first agencies that we started working with were from Bourgogne. So we have an historical partnership from the place, which is great. And in compared to others where white were widely represented, it's red wines that we have focused on mainly.
And just in terms of your customer base, we'll give us an indication of what your customer mix is.
Alors on private individuals, you mean?
In terms of your trade and private, yeah.
Today, trade and private are, we'll say 60 private, 65 private to 35 on trade, and based mostly in the UK for most of it, which is one of the reasons why Bourgogne has been so successful for us, because we know that London-based clients or UK-based clients are Bourgogne lovers.
Excellent, great. So Nicolas, can I come to you and perhaps you can just give us your take on Armit Wines and obviously I guess the Bourgogne's role within there.
So good morning, everybody. So I'm Nicolas from Armit Wine. Armit Wine is a 30-year-old business. We are importer and distributor within UK. We work in terms of Burgundy. First of all, we are a multiple channel distributor, on trade, off trade, private client, national. We do a bit of broking as well, distributing to other traders as well. We work in Burgundy with approximately 30 producers. That campaign for us, or Burgundy in general, will represent between 8 to 12%, depending on the vintage, depending on the year, of our total turnover. So as I was saying, we are multiple channel, strong focus on private clients, but as well on trade and retail.
Okay, so clearly a major significant proportion of your business is reliant.
It is very important, yeah. Out of, it is a good proportion, yeah.
Great. Okay. Well, we can drill in a little bit more into what trends you're seeing in terms of what people are looking to buy. Turning now to Louis Fabrice, could you perhaps give us the perspective from yourself as a producer, but obviously from the BIVB's point of view, and I guess why you're wanting to host these webinars this week, and just sort of your take really on how the region has fared over the last 12 months.
As you all know, November, December, especially this year, is a very important time for Burgundy. The Hospices de Beaune are due to take place in 10 days' time. They've been postponed a couple of times, but they are due to take place in 10 days' time. And as you know also, we are preparing the Bourgogne Week in January. As you all know, and many of you that I know show Burgundy wines. So it's true that we let Bordeaux with en primeur tasting. April is for them, but Jan is for us. After that, we had a pretty good year in Burgundy. From a vintage point of view, 2020 is looking very good. I know if you read the press, you would say it's another global warming vintage. It's very true that we have a hot summer, but at the end of the day, we've been able to achieve a vintage which is very balanced, and you will see that in the weeks to come, showing a nice acidity. And as you know, this is very important for the image of Burgundy, to show that we are not making wines above 14 degrees of alcohol. And so from that point of view, 2020 is very good news. And I would also say one of the reasons why Burgundy is still successful, and we don't want to sound pretentious, is also because we are making good wines. And certainly when you remember that 016, 017, 018, 019, 020, here we are with four good to very good vintages in a row. And certainly it has helped us business-wise in a very challenging time to have some very decent figures, especially export-wise. There's only one figure I can deliver, is that export-wise, at the end of October, Burgundy is only down by 7% in value and 3 or 4% in volume. When it comes to our domestic market, we're more likely to be around -15 or 20, but otherwise, we've been able to show some decent figures. And one of the reasons why I'm also here today with you is, which is very good news we love our friend from the UK, but UK once again has become the first export market of Burgundy. When I look at the figures end of October, Burgundy is up 10% in volume, so which is a very nice achievement, especially with Chablis and Mâcon, and we up 2% in value end of October, all of us together. So it's a very nice result. These last couple of years, it was more the US, which were our #1 market, but certainly all of us, and this is why we are looking forward to seeing, and you mentioned the restaurant back reopening and so on, but we thanks to the UK market, we are showing some relatively good figures. So I wouldn't say and like I say, we don't want to sound arrogant, because we are not. We know the situation is difficult. We do support our friends at the hotel and the restaurants level, But at the end of the day, we have 2 years of stock. We have some good vintages in the cellar. Business export wise is relatively good. So when it comes to prices, I mean, we will know more in the weeks to come at the grower level, but certainly one of the most important message we wish to convey in the months to come is that the message of stability. And sometimes we have customers telling us, you know, Burgundy, there is a recession, there is the COVID, Burgundy prices are going to fall down, you must suffer like hell. No, we are not. And I think this is important. I thank you, Richard, to give me the opportunity to deliver that message that even though it has been difficult with the COVID, I mean, for no one from a personal point of view, but I would say that Burgundy is still standing up. Good wine, vintages with us. So we, like I say, we don't want to sound pretentious, but we are there. We have plenty of good wines. We wish to sell more reds in the UK, and certainly this is one of the subjects we wish to raise with you, because it's true, UK has become, I wouldn't say too much white, because we are very pleased with the achievements of Chablis and Mâcon, but at the end of the day, certainly, and it's something we do discuss inside the BIVB, which is to put more emphasis on the reds and the Pinot Noir. But at the end of the day, here we are a week before the auspice. We are relieved. Had we known in the spring that we could finish the year like that, we would have signed easily. But like I say, we don't want to look arrogant, and you know, for many, especially French region, it hasn't been that easy. But 2020 has been, in those difficult times, has been relatively good to Burgundy.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it'd be really reassuring to lots of people to hear you mention the word stable there, because I guess that's the one word that not many people have been able to say this year. So, and actually the export figures there in terms of, was it 7% overall down, but in the UK actually still quite healthy. That's quite a surprise, really, compared to what you.
It's not a surprise.
From other countries and compared to other countries.
I think the UK customers, they know their Burgundy well. I mean, you know them as well as me, our UK customers, in this difficult time. And we've seen that in some other countries as well, but not to the extent of the UK. They come back to what they know. They come back to the Gevrey, the Mâcon, names, either négociants or growers they know. There is, you know, and we've been through that in the past. I mean, Burgundy has been around for ages, and in recession time, you of course you lose business, but also you gain because people are coming back to what they know. And what do they know better than Burgundy in the UK? Apart from Bordeaux and Champagne. So I wouldn't say they come back to the real values, but certainly there is a bit of that.
Okay, well, perhaps just going back to the panel in terms of, like, I mean, I don't want to obviously focus too much on 2020 because obviously we're a year we all like to be at, but just to kind of give a couple of comments perhaps on how your individual businesses responded to COVID and kind of where you feel as though you were coming out of 2020, I suppose. Perhaps Nicolas, if I come to you first for that.
Thank you. But how did we react? We were in front of, back in March, obviously we were in front of an entire channel, which is the on-trade, completely closed down for an uncertain amount of time. Obviously, how do we work with on-trade is we hold stock for them, that we have possibility to supply and supply, to not stop the supply. Those stock were there, so we were quite quick to reshuffle all those line to different channels, basically. So one of the most important channel for us has been the retail. So that has been quite good as a pickup. National channel as well, multiple, the Majestics, the Outbeans of our trade have been very helpful. And as well, we were, I mean, there is always with the bad comes the good. We were in front of, we were holding some stock, and as well by a strategy of maybe buying less but surviving or carry on with our stock holding. That was quite helpful as well to reduce our stock and to put us back in a stronger position came the end of the year. In terms of Burgundy, that was quite helpful as well. We were in front of we were at the back of two generous campaigns in terms of quantity, 17 and 18. So we were back in March, we were starting to receive some 18, but we had some 17 left as well. So it was a good opportunity as well to work differently, mostly on drinkability or drinking physical stock rather than selling non-physical stock, basically. So notifying that on-trade will represent between 25 to 30% of our overall business. I think come December, we are potentially in a very good position and potentially better than where we were early 2020. So with the bad comes some good. That's definitely.
Well, that's very encouraging to hear. Actually, it's I guess, but having that mixture of channels has really helped you, I suppose, drawing.
You got the expression, do not put your eggs in the same basket. So
Yeah.
we're kind of fortunate on that side, and very fortunate to act quickly as well.
Yeah. So Omar, I guess I mean, people will look at Bibendum as being traditionally a kind of an on-trade distributor, but I guess you've also been able to flex your channels, if there's such an expression.
Yeah, there is now, Richard. There is now. Yes, absolutely. I think I mirror an awful lot of what Nicolas said about stock holdings, about working with currently held stock rather than looking at shipping more. What we certainly have seen is because on-trade is such a large part of what we do. Our Bourgogne sales this year compared to a more normal year are overall down. What we have seen is a change in the mix. So actually, our regional on-trade sales have surprisingly, actually, as a share of overall, stayed roughly in the same place, excluding multiple off-trade off of this. I don't have visibility of exact numbers on that, but I have a visibility of sort of roughly their changes, and I can come to that in a minute. National on-trade actually has seen a big drop in the amount of Bourgogne that has gone through to that channel, but then the independent retail has grown hugely. I mean, sort of threefold increase in their sales of Bourgogne. So whilst the overall numbers are down, we've certainly seen a shift. Off-trade, I know, have seen numbers going up for Bourgogne, and that's particularly driven by Macon and Chablis and generic Bourgogne level, which is what you'd expect in national off-trade. You're not expecting to see much Grand Cru going through supermarkets. But there's certainly been that sort of shift going on for us. So it's been, from the on-trade side of things, obviously a very difficult year, but what we were doing from very early on was looking at those businesses that were able to, after a short while, move into takeaway as part of their offer, supporting them as much as we could, helping them with writing lists. Also, we developed an app called Local, which allowed them to transact with customers through an app, so they could actually order and pay. So if you had an on-trade establishment that had never done takeaway before, all of a sudden they had a way to do that and load a list very quickly. And we found a number of customers actually finding takeaway being an incredibly useful way to do things differently. And whether that was, in most cases, would have been driven by stock they were holding in the restaurant, because of course, more than anything, they needed to shift through the stock they had. But we found some people actually extending their lists and offering, because they were finding people were spending more than they normally would have done, and because they were working on retail margins, they could go to higher perception wines and actually sell better quality, which was really in favour of a region like Bourgogne, where people were looking at, let's say, village level Bourgogne wines and saying, well, actually, I wouldn't normally buy this in a restaurant, but I will buy it on takeaway because the price is more attractive at the moment. And so you might see certain establishments always having a takeaway menu that order at the beginning of the week, we'll deliver it at the weekend with your Sunday lunch that we're going to do for you, and things like that. And effectively working almost like a little broking list through the restaurant for customers, which actually worked in a number of establishments incredibly well. It was a lot of fun. They got to offer wines they wouldn't normally sell.
Yeah, well, I think we've all seen an incredible shift in how people have been able to run their businesses, haven't we? I mean, I know we'll look at that a little bit later on when we talk about how things what trends we've seen in 2020, what trends will stay with us in the next year ahead. Just picking up with Hugues, I mean, do you want to just quickly just talk us through, from your point of view, from Wine Source, how the year has
been? It's very close, though. Yeah, of course, it's very close to what Nicolas and Omar were saying. You know, and I think Nicolas made a great point. We took the time to look into our stock, and even more looking onto what is available now, ready for delivery, because that's what people wanted. All those wines that are amazing to drink with a few years aging in a cellar that are now ready to be tasted. But we also launched in the same time something that we haven't done. So we took the time to properly develop e-commerce, which was for us a strong development. We put a lot of energy, a lot of people. That changed a little bit to the on-trade that they were used to do, but with the idea of making it with a lot of energy that people could come to it quite easily and make it very, very, livable. So it's probably one of the key that we have changed. It's not something that we had in the past, and that's something that we changed because our on-trade was very slow compared to the others. Because most of the people that we work with on on-trade, not 100%, but are top hotels that been closed and top restaurants that were closed for such a long time. We needed to find another solution. And same for private individuals, finding alternatives to what they normally would taste, changing a little bit the option of tasting, still organizing those, Zoom call where we could taste with our client and have the producer still, present around the table, even though it was around the computer.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, and your e-commerce model, you obviously had a platform there beforehand. It was a case of making that in terms of developing that more, or? Actually,
no. We didn't really have an e-commerce platform. We created it from scratch when we saw it was a good necessity to have it.
Right. Interesting. Well, perhaps we'll pick up on that as well then a little bit later on as well. Justin, coming to you. I mean, I know you mentioned at the beginning, you've got a very different kind of business model, but what trends or what impact has the last year had on Livex?
Well, I think it'd be in many ways, Livex has always been online.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's been very easy for our members to work remotely with Livex. They can be in a cafe, they can be in their bedroom at home, they can be in the office, and they can log in and watch the market and transact. So the challenges, we didn't face the same sort of challenges that our merchant members perhaps did. The obvious physical challenge we had is that we still had to settle all trades. So the warehouse environment had to change. We had to make sure that all the social distancing laws, etc., are in place, particularly in our London hub. But where each hub had to follow its own national guidance. So there was that. In terms of what our members what our members report, I mean, I think you've got Omar's just suggested, if you were on trade, you had to make some pretty big decisions because you close off the hospitality sector and you have a major problem. So there was a lot of pivoting, it seemed, to that private client facing businesses, and those who were already purely focused as private client businesses did well. I mean, they reported as we went into the first lockdown, sales in March, April was stronger than the Christmas before, as people rushed to stock not just loo paper, but get their cellars in shape for an extended lockdown. We also, and I think Hugues' point is very interesting, is that we've seen certainly a move toward e-commerce or automation of trade as much as possible. And I think that is perhaps something that we might talk about a bit later. That's a trend going forward. So that people are now, from Livex's perspective, able to connect their list directly onto Livex. Equally, buyers are able to connect directly into that Livex network and offer their stock globally to whoever their clients are. And so automated transactions whereby the member, his or herself, don't actually touch the screen, it just happens. Automation trades went up and nudged 40% of all transactions on LiveX in November, having started the year closer to 20. So that connectivity, that e-commerce driven trend, I think is probably just begun in many ways.
Yeah, and it's fascinating that you're able to take that, as you say, independent, almost I don't know, helicopter view of we've heard a lot about how the e-commerce has really changed the market, but I guess those kind of figures illustrate it from an actual trading aspect.
Yes.
And I think also I really noticed actually with LiveX this year that I know you've always had a very strong content and you produce lots of reports and information, but I think has it been an opportunity for you as well, really, to really drill into your data this year and be able to share a lot more of that kind of information?
There has, and actually, it's one of our investments for next year is to take. I mean, one of the interesting thing about this year is that the liquidity of the market and the breadth of the market has grown enormously, and this is part of people connecting automatically, and therefore the more, we started the year with about £50 million worth of live exposure, bid offer exposure. At the moment, we're sitting on £82 million of bid offer exposure, of which about 20% is Burgundy. But we in order to, that's a lot of numbers, and so we need to, and we intend to invest through next year to really be able to extract that data, analyze it, and share it amongst our members. So that's an ongoing theme for us.
Yeah. Well, I know from a journalism point of view, the reports you produce are really invaluable. So keep up that side of it, please. Now, I mean, obviously you're trading all online, and I know we've all managed to keep ourselves going with Zooms and all the rest of it. But nothing. Obviously, the traditional wine trade is all about going out and actually going to the vineyards and talking to producers and seeing each other and negotiating face to face. I mean, can I just ask the trade guys? I mean, how have you managed to keep that going, and what kind of, just in terms of literally being able to taste wine, keep talking to producers, find new wines? I mean, how much of a challenge has that been this year? I mean, Omar, do you want to pick up on that one, perhaps?
Sure. Yeah, it's clearly, very, very challenging from the point of view of customer tastings during full lockdown. On trade wasn't open anyway, so there really was no looking to rewrite lists. So we did quite a lot of stuff internally. So we were doing online tastings with producers, with whichever your favorite video platform is for doing those sort of things. But lots of that going on. Most of that would be done with stock that we were holding rather than necessarily new stock. Again, we touched earlier on about actually having to rationalize your stock holdings during this period, and we weren't really looking to take on new producers or necessarily ship next vintage at this point. It was very much make sure we understood what we had and making sure the teams are all up to date on that. There was always, in what we do in any business, you're always looking at new potential avenues for business, and so we were talking to potential new customers and prospects through that time. And so there were certainly tastings there where we were talking to people looking actually more to, well, at the time we hoped 3-4 months time, and now it turns out that these conversations having started in April or May this year, we're really looking at probably March or April next year when new businesses already start opening their doors and doing things. We did do had a few producers involved in the 67 Pall Mall masterclass tastings from Bourgogne. Nicolas Rosignol certainly did a session on those. So that was a good one for direct customer interactions. Then really it's just been about where there has been customers that we're working with, where we're looking at changing lists that was already part of an ongoing process. We would get them in touch with producers, and that we did a little bit in Burgundy. We did all across the world. We do a lot of work with Jason Atherton's social group, for example, and we did quite a lot of sessions with them early on. So really an element of being in response to what customers were able to and wanted to do. An awful lot of people were in the on-trade were having to work out how on earth they kept their businesses afloat, and and how they rationalize their list, quite frankly, rather than looking to do new listings. But where there was a chance to bring a team up to speed, we were certainly using video conferencing for that and sending in samples.
Okay, and also, has it ironically been an opportunity to actually sort of strengthen some of your relationships with some of your more established producers, because I guess you already have a relationship in the first place, but in a way by being able to talk to each other a lot easier just by picking up the phone or picking up Zoom. And
yeah, I think it's certainly changed behaviours in those ways. And what's wonderful is normally that would have been the buyer or myself or one of our director of sales having a meeting and sitting down and going, what's our strategy for this year? We would always then have stuff where we would have that producer sitting in front of sales teams as well. But obviously we have national coverage, as do a lot of the other guys, and getting the sales team from the northwest of England or the southwest into a tasting in London is not always easy. And to be honest, we were underutilizing things like video calls to do that in the past. We've suddenly realized now how easy it is. So not only have we been able to do tastings and training, if you like, between producers and our sales teams over video, but we've also been in Europe, but we've done things like I recently did one with a winemaker we work with in China. And, you know, that's something where we had 8 of us on the call, plus the producer. We'd often then sometimes involve some customers as well. That's just not been doable in the old way of working. So there's absolutely been an upside in that sense. And I think that we will see continue. Then it just becomes an issue of if you're looking at new vintages and new stocks, how do you get those wines to people? But that's far from an impossible thing. You know, you look at how often we get delivery services knocking on our doors at the moment, and I'm sure one of us at least will have some knock in the middle of this meeting where someone from Amazon or whatever is delivering. That's become a very easy way to get things out to people, and so we've used that a lot, and that's been incredibly useful, both internally with staff and with customers and with prospects. So, and building that relationship, so the producer gets to spend time with those team members and with those customers more easily than they have done in the past. It's not quite evocative. Seeing everyone's front room is lovely, but I'd rather be in the vineyards or in a winery, if I'm honest.
No, that's been pretty interesting answer. Thank you. Nicola, is a similar story for yourselves at Armit in terms of how you've been able to keep those relationships going with your producers and how you managed to cope with that?
Yeah, of course, it was similar. And I think, as Omar mentioned, we were quite grateful about several companies on the lack of 67 Palmal, but we work with Wine Sorted as well, or sometimes producers themselves being able to deliver miniature to be able to generate tasting, online virtual tasting. I think in terms of business, one of the first steps this year and kind of uncertain was the Bordeaux campaign, the EP Bordeaux campaign. Not being able to go there to test the vintage. And I think luckily we had a very good campaign, huge demand for them drop in prices, and as well the critic being there to support the campaign. So that's been quite welcome, but a very strange year. Compared to Burgundy, I might be one of the lucky ones there, but I actually done my lockdown in France, so I was able to travel in France. So I stayed 1 month in France, able to go to see, well, not only Burgundy, but as well Bordeaux, for example. So to travel there and to maintain relationship, because yes, my relationship and Zoom and all those virtual platforms has been a great help, but there is nothing replacing the physicality of our business. And so yeah, I'm finishing my quarantine right now, and I am a lucky man to have been well. I'm full of 2019 vintage Burgundy, so that's and that brings us a bit of credibility as well, I think.
Yeah, and it's strange. It's almost like you hear that story and you almost feel like an explorer. The fact you've gone to France for a month seems so exotic. But Hugues, have you been able to go to France at all this year, or?
Alors, you will see the particularity of my position is I look after a private client in the UK, but I'm based in France. So I've been in lockdown in France since the beginning.
Oh, okay, I didn't realize.
I was very lucky, like Nicolas. Again, for work purposes, the travels were allowed. So I managed to go and see some of the producers that we work with. And again, like Nicolas said, not only in Bourgogne, but also in Rhône Valley, in Rhône, in Bordeaux, and Loire. I managed to travel a little bit. And actually, this year, because I was like not traveling outside France, I took even more time to go and see the producers that we love so much, and took the time to, just not to do a Zoom call as a lot of you said, but just see the person. Alors, on my side, where is the downfall is private individuals. Most of the clients that I look after, what I love is to see them, which have not been the case for the past actually 9 months. It has been extremely difficult because coming to London was not an obligation, and honestly not really security intelligence safe. So relation with customer has been good. It's in situation like that we need to go back to the basics, and go back to what we love to do so much, is a simple meeting with a producer, and not only talk about the business and the COVID, because obviously it has impacted us, but see how we can grow further with the producer that we have. And that's this year, again, like Nicolas said, in all that bad, we had some goods coming out. And I think it's a great good, because we had opportunities to talk about things that we didn't think about it earlier on.
Yeah, and I guess they were very pleased to see you as well. I guess there weren't so many buyers and knocking on their door.
Yeah, no, it's true, and it was very exciting, and there are so many things that we can think about when we have time to think about them. And I think it's one of the greatest things. Yes, we were all under pressure to find business somewhere, and I agree with that. It was a difficult time. We had to find new business. We had to develop, but on the other side, we also had plenty of time to think how we can be better in what we do. Yeah. And I think it's a key element into that COVID. We could get better into what we do. Yeah,
that's a brilliant comment. Louis, Fabrice, coming back to you from obviously you being in Bourgogne yourself. I mean, how did the region respond, and how have you found it not really being able to see many of your key buyers face to face?
It has been a big frustration, especially the Burgundians. As you all know, they are very good when it comes to welcome customers in their cellar. They need that personal contact. No, it has been difficult for all of us. So for those who are showing a well-known appellation with a well-known name, it's easier. But certainly for us, the biggest challenge is that to introduce into the market some new appellation, or to run some appellation, or to gain new customers. So with the usual suspect, I mean, life has been relatively easy. We know each other for a very long time, especially in a very traditional market like the UK. We know each other, we know the vintages, but even to introduce 018, which is a great vintage, we've been very frustrated. In many cases, we have to cancel tasting. So it can go like that for 6 months to a year, but we wouldn't like it to last too long. And we see that with the auction, which is due to take place in 10 days. The fact that we cannot welcome our customers to be seated with them at the Clos Vougeot in the auction room, it's a big frustration. So no more than another couple of months, and let's come back to the good usual days.
Perhaps if we now sort of just drill a little bit more into the actual trends in terms of what actually is selling from Bourgogne in the UK. Just in terms of, you mentioned here, there obviously has been lots of change in terms of through which channels Bourgogne's been sold through, but any thoughts on what trends you've seen in terms of the styles, the appellations that are really done well in 2020? Nicolas, perhaps if I come to you.
Yeah, sure. As I said, 2020, all of a sudden, we can't see customer. We are sitting, at home, most of us, all of us, come March and April time. I think the trend was, and if we speak about particularly Burgundy, it was to drink at home. for everybody, myself included. But looking at a certain affordability or value for money on what we were drinking. So that was a perfect fit for a lot of village appellation or regional appellation. Basically, if we speak about Burgundy, all the Chablis of this world, Macon we mentioned, but as well, introducing some Marsanais, some Haute-Côte, Haute-Côte de Nuit, Côte de Nuit Village, all those kind of appellations, which are presenting still in for Burgundy a value for money, which are delicious to drink, particularly when, even if they are quite young and on them fresh vintage. So that's been a key. And again, you know, we were lucky to have 17, 18 because 18 was arriving physically in UK from March, right in the same time, basically. So that was an opportunity to follow up, in fact, of the EP campaign. And listen, now the stock is physical. Those wines are beautiful, they are open, they are approachable when they are young. Go for it. So that was more or less key, basically. And 17 was there with this precision and beautifulness as well. So those vintage were key. If that's carry on and 19 coming along with this very short harvest and short yield, might not be the same case scenario. But again, it was the appropriate moment, basically. So
okay, thank you. And Omar, you mentioned earlier a little bit about some of the wine sales that you were seeing. I mean, just a bit more specifically, just around sort of price points and appellations that you've seen through Bourgogne.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, I think because we're so heavily on trade focused, a big part of this, and this goes back to something Louis said earlier on, we are heavily driven by white wine in Bourgogne. And actually, to the point that really surprised me when I really drilled down into numbers. Most years you're looking at 80% of sales turnover value-wise is white rather than red in Bourgogne, which surprised me. Maybe because I'm more of a red drinker myself, but the level of shift was huge. And in fact, if anything, whilst obviously numbers overall are down this year, we have seen the shift to white be even stronger this year when things have been open. Maybe that's because the main period when on-trade was open was during the summer, but we've seen shift to a 90-10 shift this year, if anything. Within that regionally, and the regions haven't really changed much this year, you're looking at sort of 45% of what we do is Chablis, 30% of what we do is Côte d'Or, then 10% Macon, 5-ish% regional, so Bourgogne, and then that's kind of where most of these things are. Very much driven by village level wines. So I'd say 70% of what we do is at village level. Again, that's probably very much focused on Chablis, but if you look across the range, village level does seem to really push things. What we have seen this year, which has been interesting, is in the one area that has increased is the Premier Cru and Grand Cru sales. Have probably, their share has probably doubled. Now, again, overall numbers we know are down, but it seems like when there were opportunities for people to come out and spend some money in restaurants, those people who do love Burgundy, who do love Bourgogne, were actually going, you know what? Normally I'll buy a village level, but I haven't been out for a month, 2 months, 3 months. I'll take someone's Premier Cru today, or the Premier Cru drinkers moving up to Grand Cru. And we've certainly seen that in a way which I actually find quite exciting. I mean, I'm not sure how long it'll carry on beyond that, but what it has beyond, this year of restricted eating out, shall we say. But what it will do is introduce some of those people who maybe hadn't gone up to those higher levels to see what that is offering, and that will open their eyes to perhaps where there is a price point difference and why you might pay it. Those kind of the biggest trends, and I think that increase in quality has been really interesting. Beyond that, things have relatively stayed in the same place as far as regions and things goes, but it's been that shift in overall more white. And then where you are seeing things going, actually, where people are spending money, they're going to higher quality. And that's been quite interesting.
And I guess the independents have had a role to play there as well, haven't they? The independent merchants.
Absolutely.
Hand sell where sommeliers can't be hand selling. You've got the independent merchants being able to do that.
Yeah, and I've always seen those two trades as having quite a strong parallel. The job of a good independent retailer is very similar to the role of a good independent restaurant and a sommelier. It's about understanding your customer. It's about picking the wines that suit that person on that day and having that conversation. And over time, building that relationship. So next time they come in, almost before they're through the door, what you think is going to be an exciting new thing for them to try. And independent retailers certainly stepped up on that side of things. In Burgundy, as I said, we've seen a threefold increase in their share, and probably a best part of a 40 to 50% increase in their sales of Burgundy this year, which whilst it hasn't filled the whole of our on-trade side of things, it's nice to see that increasing, and that I think could be something that lasts going forward.
Great, excellent. And Hugues, have you what have you been seeing from through wine sources?
Very similar stories. I think in general people were also a little bit more open-minded to discover new area that they haven't seen for a very long time, like Pouilly-Fuissé, for example, or the Mâconnais. We had a lot of kind of good reaction that when we were saying you should try that, and when people were very focused on top villages like Meursault, Pouligny-Morachet, Chassagne, they are actually opening their mind to look at what we do as a general different offers. So that was also very positive. It's true that like the other said, Chablis became also very strong for us. With good partnership, and people were coming back to us and say, "Oh, we'd love to drink a little bit more Chablis. What do you have in stock?" And we saw also the trend of going from a village level to actually go to a Premier Cru or to a Grand Cru. So it was very positive. On my side, with private individuals, I was extremely surprised to see them so willing to discover and willing to talk about it. And even on vintages that they might, we have the luxury to have a little bit of older vintages that just 18, 17, and it was great to be able to show them a little bit even difficult vintages, and they would say, actually it's drinkable, it's good, let's go on to that.
Yeah, I think that whole consumer trend we've seen this year for people seeking out more authenticity. We've seen a resurgence in people going to local butchers and all that kind of thing. But it's all part of that story as well, isn't it? And Justin, I mean, from the marketplace point of view, what kind of trends did you see coming through in terms of what was selling through?
Well, of course, the market that we observe is a secondary market, so it's not grower, merchant, consumer. It's grower, merchant, collector, back to merchant, collector, whatever it tends, and by definition, this is a secondary market for sort of the higher end, perhaps, of wines. And if I take you back a bit, 10 years ago, the secondary market was driven by Bordeaux, and it was China, and it was new money, and it led to Bordeaux and prices going through the roof. Those prices, at that stage, Bordeaux was literally 90%, 95% of the fine wine secondary market. And Burgundy then was 1%, and that was Domaine Romani-Conti. That was the reality. Bordeaux hit a wall, and buyers started to look for value elsewhere. They also were becoming more sophisticated. This new money was no longer just satisfied with buying the first gross, etc. Bordeaux. They wanted to, explore the wine market and feel as though they were learning something. Their focus moved to Burgundy. So over the next 10 years, from 2010 to last year, we saw Burgundy's market share go from that 1% to 20%. This is by value. And prices in Burgundy then just took off, and they rose 150% against a broader market of a 40% rise. Right. At this stage, and Bordeaux, that's over those 10 years, was only up 25%. So it was a complete reconfiguration of this secondary market. Since then, since the end of last year, the prices got at the high end got to such a point that we began to see Burgundy prices pull back, and its market share is down from 20 to 18%. But interestingly, the volumes have been retained, And that tells us that people are looking, they're not leaving. The allure of Burgundy is still very much there, but they're now looking for value. They're looking for the lesser known appellation, et cetera, et cetera. So, and what we've seen this year is the number of wines. So a wine being grower and commune, down to the individual parcel, has grown about 35% this year on last. So that means that we're seeing more growers involved in the secondary market at lower price points.
Right.
And this is part of this is I suppose people beginning to understand Burgundy better. This is more connectivity, more transparency. Your three panelists here, all merchants doing their job, representing these wines, getting them out there, getting the virtual tastings or not, the restaurants, etc. So while Burgundy feels as though at the top end we've seen the best of it, it always, all these regions, they lead from the top, and that's how the rest of the region gets involved. And we're beginning, I think, to see that broadening of people's appetite for Burgundy.
Yeah, and again, that's very reassuring, because obviously, 2-3 years ago, there's a sort of like a lot of the movement away from those higher prices, and perhaps places of Italy and other areas were sort of picking up, weren't they, in the secondary market? So it's kind of reassuring to hear that there's actually a lot more different routes into it again.
There are. I mean, I just think
I would like to say
the headlines suggest that we're past peak at the top end, but certainly the volumes of Burgundy are holding. So
yeah,
it basically points to a broadening of the appetite.
Brilliant. Luc Fabrice, you wanted to pick up something there?
Yes, but certainly, of course, when we look at Burgundies, especially many of you are showing well-known high value Burgundy, but as we all know, they've gone up in prices. I cannot deny that trend. But at the end of the day, we should not forget that 50% of Burgundy is more regional appellation. They try to be reasonable when it comes to prices, and this is one of the reasons why Macon and Chablis have been successful, and also Burgundy. So all what you said, all of you, does reflect the fact that the diversity of channel, the multiple, the independent, the on-trade, has helped Burgundy to maintain his market share, not only in the UK, but worldwide, and also the diversity of appellation. And there are the Grand Cru, there are the regional, of course, but there is also some very good village. And you mentioned Puy-Fussé, but there is also Montagny, which is doing very well in the UK, which do meet some faithful customers. So at the end of the day, one of the strengths of Burgundy is diversity of operators. I mean, Négociant, I'm one of them, even though we have a little domain also. But the growers, the Négociant, the co-ops, the diversity of appellation, diversity of channels, and that help us a lot to maintain our position. And when it comes to mention vintages, I will also add the fact that, and it's very rightly what one of you mentioned, is that 017, which is more restaurant-friendly vintage, not the complexity and the austerity of 16, has helped us a lot in the on-trade. And now customers are waiting for 018, which is the most powerful vintage. But certainly, like I said at the very beginning, we also do well because this recession has come at a time where we have a very nice diversity in terms of style of vintages. And I wouldn't say there is a vintage for everyone, but certainly it has helped us. Had it come 10 years ago, our life would have been much more challenging.
Yeah, and just going back to what the trade panelists were saying in terms of the trends, in terms of what they were seeing, is that something similar to what was also happening in some of your other key markets around the world?
No, you know what? We are all of us a bit surprised in Burgundy to see, because worldwide, like we say in French, there is a very nice expression in French. I don't know if we can translate it into English. We always say in Burgundy, la Bourgogne blanchit. So the market Burgundy is becoming more and more white, and the market is becoming more and more red. And worldwide, the Burgundy reds are performing better than in the UK. And certainly, I would say this is our big surprise so far this year and these last 18 months. How is it that with all the the progress and the Pinot Noir, we are always a bit puzzled, and certainly it's something we wish at the BIVB to discuss with all of you. With the how is it that Burgundy is now 80% white in England? I mean, it sounds very strange for us, even though we do see a big demand for straight Bourgogne Rouge. Perhaps we don't perform well enough with the Centenay, with the Pernod Vergelais Reds, perhaps with Marsanne. I don't know, and I'm curious to know what all of you think. But certainly, like I mentioned, there is a little frustration on that side.
Okay, well, perhaps we should just pick up on that then, really, in terms of where our panel, what specific kind of areas of the category you think can grow more, or where the potential is. You know, picking up on what Louis Fabrice says, but also just in terms of, you know, some of the appellations or the village or the price points. I mean, where would you sort of see over the next 18 months real opportunities for you to sort of grow the Bourgogne category? Go on, Omar. I'll throw it back. I'll throw it to you first.
Thank you. So yeah, I think, I mean, clearly red has room to grow, and quite considerably, in particular in the on-trade. I think part of it is when you look at white wine, when you look at white Bourgogne across all quality levels, it's hard to think of, you know, Chardonnay from anywhere else that you kind of go, right, well, that's, and particularly at price points where you think, well, that's over-competing on Bourgogne. I've got so many other opportunities. There are obviously the Chardonnay from all over the place, but I think Chardonnay from Burgundy still has this allure that, and it's accessible from a drinking point of view. Young vintages that are on the market, which as wholesalers and importers, you are usually working with relatively young vintages. They are drinking there and then. If we're importing reds of the same vintage or maybe one vintage behind, they are not, and in a lot of cases, yet at the point where they are as generous and as ready and as open as you would necessarily want them to be. And so there is a wider choice of things to work with from the rest of the world. However, we do work with, a lot of the reds we work with are a little bit older. I think 17, as Louis Fabrice mentioned, actually has been a very useful vintage in that way. We started working with a few producers where 17 was our first vintage. Francois Millet, his first vintage of releasing wines under his own name was 17, and those wines have been incredibly accessible. And for a winemaker at his level to be making things that are accessible right off the bat in red is wonderful. I do think there is clearly an opportunity for those lesser known red appellations, be that Marsanne, Fisan, Mercury. We started working with Tupinier Batista recently, and in Mercury, and we've seen a lot of success with that. With Domaine Pavolo in Savigny-les-Beaunes, and the big thing there is price point as much as anything, to be honest with you. The fact that we're selling them into the trade at sort of, let's say, roughly £15 a bottle, that's going on to a restaurant list at roughly 60, and these are very broad, rough numbers, but that's well above the average spend on a bottle in a restaurant if you're looking nationally. But if you're looking at a central London decent restaurant and a good, normally 55 to 60% of our sales normally are through London restaurants for Burgundy, so that is where the market really sits, then there is an opportunity here to take people up a price point, and that sort of £60–70 on a list is not an inaccessible price point. In a lot of other places that would be. So there is an opportunity there. I think the difficulty thing there is that combination then between perceived drinkability at a young age, and I think with riper vintages, with less extraction perhaps, which I think we're seeing more generally across reds in Burgundy these days. Those two things help, more accessibility of drinking right off the bat. Those are where the opportunities are. But you're then moving into appellations where people don't know what they are, and that becomes our responsibility and the restaurateur's responsibility and independent retailers to explain that and to say, well, look, we know that you used to love having a bottle of Chambol. Well, our Chambol is now twice the price of our, well, it always was, but it's twice the price of our Savigny or whatever. And that's now taking it out of where you would come and spend money on a Tuesday night in the restaurant. Yeah. So it's about educating people who may have previously been drinking a Chambol or a Gevrey or a Nuit Saint-Georges and going, right, this is where you need to go next. And I think as a trade in the UK generally, maybe we're not as familiar with those lesser villages and lesser appellations as we should be. I think in France, those appellations have much more following. People know them much better. I think there's been much more accessibility through supermarkets and those in French, or much more general retail in France than here. And we've never had that. You know, you'll have generic level wines and a couple of big villages, but you won't have that real diversity across Bourgogne. And that's where I think, that's where us and our restaurant customers need to kind of step up and fill that gap. Because there is still an appetite for Burgundy. We know that there's a big appetite for Pinot Noir. We know that. And we just need to match those two things up. And it's about being a bit more adventurous, exploring a little bit more, and showing where that value exists.
Yeah, and I think it's a real testimony to the diversity within the region that even after all these decades and these years, you know, we can still talk about all these new avenues. I mean, Hugues, I mean, can I come to you? I mean, in terms of what's exciting you, or what will be exciting you in terms of some of those more specific?
It was tough because it was something that was not very well represented in our portfolio. You know, all those appellations like Centenay, like Mercury, and we really wanted to grow that in 2020. Obviously, with not being able to move as often as we wanted to, we have not developed the partnership that we wanted, but it's moving forward. But you know, I think the educating part is the key there. A lot of people trust us. That's the reason why they work with us. You know, some of my clients have been working with them way over the 10 years that Wine Source is existing, because they were seeing me in every restaurant I've been working in London. Some of them have been working for 15 years with them. So, you know, when you go to them and you tell them, listen, what I really think is developing for the moment that you should try, which is extremely exciting, very good, will be the wine that they will try. And for sure, all those smaller appellations, because the quality is still there. We never denied that the quality wasn't there. It was not, we'll say, well presented by us. And it's, again, you know, when I come back to what I said earlier on, getting better in what we do is also to, you know, see those parts and being able to offer those wines, because they are key, especially at the price points that a lot of people will spend, you know, which are 15 to 25 pounds buying, you know, directly from us, and with something which is extremely drinkable.
Yeah. So, you know, the door is very much open, really, for someone like yourselves to.
Yeah, of course, and we are looking at producers who we want to work with, even though we have you know, small amounts with some Savigny-les-Beaunes, with some Beaune. What we want to explore even more is those smaller appellations. We've done it in the white because we had demand, especially from the on-trade. But with the red, yes, we need to do it even more, because even private individuals are asking us for those appellations.
Excellent, thank you. Justin, have you got a comment on where you see potentially the more, what potentially could excite you in terms of some of the smaller areas? Or
I think this is very much the job of the panel you have in front of you, who represent these growers. But you know, my general argument would be that that connectivity, the internet technology gives people greater accessibility. And one of the hardest things with somewhere like Burgundy, where perhaps the volumes are small, and it's quite hard for someone to find something new. Now, you may come across it in a restaurant, but then how do I get at it if I want more of it, etc.? And there's only so much capacity that a merchant has to, if you think there's that much wine in the world, and then it goes through a merchant, and then it comes back out to the potential market. And if you can connect that, and this is the merchants opening up through e-commerce, etc., you bring, you know, it will often be led by, ultimately it's consumer led. They buy something, they taste it, they enjoy it, they want some more of it, and they will then direct their merchant toward the things they want, and the merchant will go back to Burgundy and find those wines, I suspect. So I just think the opening up of the market, the greater transparency is good for all involved in this, from consumer to grower. And I suspect that trend is underway, but you know, we've got some ways to go yet. But all of those, and of course people want value. I mean, one of the tough things that Burgundy's faced more recently, and Bordeaux did it back in the day, was when you get perceived high prices, as Louis Fabi suggested. I mean, that's at that end, but actually there's plenty of good value out there across a whole lot of appellations people don't even know. So, but by at least the allure of Burgundy is there. So it's all to play for. I think people, and I think the drinkability thing is very important. Bordeaux suffers from the fact that you possibly, for great finishes, have to wait 10 years before you even breach a bottle. Well, you don't have to do that in Burgundy. You don't have to do that with the whites. You don't have to wait that long with the reds, etc., etc. So you can enjoy them earlier, and that's a great advantage for Burgundy.
Thank you. So, Nicola, when you're on your travels around Bourgogne, and I know you obviously have to go when you have a chance to go and seek out something new and exciting and different. Where would you go if you had a blank piece of paper?
Through that warm climate or climate change, I think some appellation have never been as good as they are right now, and that helping extremely the lower the entry level or the lower tier of the Bourgogne appellation. With solar vintage, you've got less mildew, less rot, so the grapes are healthy. So that means, well, the quantity is not there, okay, but the quality is there. So you never had better value right now and quality in appellation like simple Bourgogne Blanc, Bourgogne Rouge. All those humid part of the different coats, some I don't know, Ladois, for example, Pernan-Vergelles, Savigny, all those villages are producing some top class quality in both white and red. The race of the Haute Côte, I was in the Haute Côte de Nuit with a producer, was telling me, yeah, but why people are not behind, basically. I mean, if you test 18, 19, even 17 in Haute Côte de Nuit, they are spotless quality. And the price remains very fair, I think it's coming, decades ago, you've seen some big name starting to explore the Mâconnais, Le Fleuve was there, Comte-Lafon was there, I mean, there's sign of things to come. Le Fleuve is planting in Haute Côte de Nuit, from 2021. Appellation, which has been struggling during the past. I don't know, maybe Marsanais, for example. Don't tell me Sylvain Bataille is struggling to sell his wine. He's selling everything, But what is the benefit for us, a grower? It's a name like that, put an appellation or a village on the map, and that helps the other to sell wine as well, because he's building the reputation of that village. So I think, yes, Louis, coming back to your comment about the red struggling a bit more in UK. At the table, what we drink in UK, we'll start with the champagne, we'll have a white Burgundy, and we'll have a red Bordeaux, and that takes time to change. But there is more and more convivial wine, and again, the quality is potent. Bourgogne Rouge right now are delicious, and they are fitting for every single channel, every single market, basically, So there's good things to come.
There's one comment that I would like to add. I think there is one thing important also in the platform of London or the UK, is that we have wine from everywhere in the world at price points that are very attractive. We obviously want to continue talking about European wines, but when we go to South Africa, Australia, California, that are coming to the UK market extremely strong, with good quality wines, with, a price point which is generating a lot of, volumes and a lot of people are drinking it. Unfortunately, there will be some downfall somewhere. And I think London has, or the UK has that potential to be such a wine platform that actually, on the top of, having difficulties because you are a smaller appellation, you also need to compete with a lot of other wines that come in from everywhere.
Yeah. Well, and it's exciting to hear from all the different buyers here that that appetite and that desire to try and find new and support new areas or new appellations. Just picking up on what the different buyers were saying there in terms of the areas in Bourgogne which they are finding particularly interesting and exciting. Is that similar kind of feeling in Bourgogne, or what's your view on what's happening actually in the region in terms of where?
No, but I fully agree with all what you've said. We need to be more successful with small villages. They are good ratio, quality, price. We need support from the trade for sure. We need support, especially from the sommelier, to explain where is Marsanais, the style of Savigny. So we need support. At the end of the day, today is going to be very challenging because, you know, we have the Brexit, there is the COVID, if there is a recession in the months to come worldwide. So our biggest challenge in Burgundy is that this is our ambition. It's to be more successful with smaller red villages, because like we say with whites, we've done our part in the UK. And look at the success of some Premier Cru Chablis and some of the Montagny and the Océ d'Urès. So we need to do more with the smaller red villages. But at the end of the day, we have to come back to normal days.
Fabrice, can you give us all a sneak preview then in terms of what you're seeing in the 19th vintage from your own estates, perhaps, and what? I mean, you mentioned earlier a little bit about the 19th vintage. Could you perhaps go into a bit more detail?
No, it's another very good vintage. Our biggest challenge, as you know, with 019 has been the quantities. Certainly the smallest with 03 and 78. Very often it sees as a hot vintage, but it's not the case. It's a bit like 2020 as well. We have some very nice extraction with the red. There will be a very nice color. It won't be the power of 018. Certainly, from that point of view, there is a big difference between 019 and 018. As you all know, 018 in red is very powerful, almost too powerful sometimes. I would say 019 will be with a very nice extraction, but perhaps a very nice finesse, but fruit driven at the same time. And we are very pleased. And when it comes to the whites, it is going to be a very good surprise, because it's a balanced vintage. Nice fruit, because like we say, we had a relatively hot summer and season. So you will see it's, and this is what we like about, 16, 17, 18, 19, is that they are all different. And one of the big charm of Burgundy is that it's very different. After that, 019 is not going to be non-expansive, because it's linked to the quantities. Yeah. And certainly, after the crop, we were a bit so sad regarding quantities.
But I guess it
was coming after 018, and we've been very fortunate in 018. So, but at the end of the day, no, it's c'est bien, good vintage, very good vintage.
Yeah, and I guess it picks it nicely with the idea of people looking for something new and different and exploring, to be able to describe a different kind of vintage as well, which is
the
market.
We can still, like I mentioned, with 019, with 2020, Burgundy can face the global warming issue. We can harvest earlier than we used to. There are things that we do nowadays, and we are still able, and this is the big message, because as you said, there is a lot of competition for Burgundy, and in one way it's good, because we make sure that we make balanced vintages, we keep the acidity, we are able to have the longevity, and we try, and 019 is a good example, not to make over powerful wine, which our customers at the end of the day, they don't really like.
So for the final few minutes, if we perhaps look ahead through 2021, and then we talked a lot at the beginning about some of the changes we've had to all make because of COVID. I mean, can we perhaps just look ahead and think about what some of those trends are going to really change the industry for the long term, and just perhaps some predictions for what we might be able to see coming forward. I mean, perhaps if I come to you, Justin, I mean, you mentioned a lot about how you've seen this real big change around this year in terms of what you've been able to do. How do you see the next 12 months?
Well, I mean, what we've done, we're obviously a technology-led company, so we think about this all the time. I think what's changed this year, and I think what will be changing going forward, is that merchants in all their shapes and sizes will be taking technology on in order to help them not only save money, because there's not a huge amount of efficiency in using technology wisely, but also providing their clients with better access to a broader set of wines. And I mean, and going forward, I think as you pointed out, you know, there's a lot of wine now being made, whether it be global warming or whether it be great improved practices in the shed. That you know, wines, there's a lot more good wine available today, but then there are a lot more people drinking wines. So the market is going to grow without a doubt. How one accesses that market will, I think, be far more technology-led going forward. And I suspect everyone, you know, the market will rise. There will be a broad, you know, expansion in the market going forward. I think it's good for all concerned. It will. There'll be bumps in the road. There always are, but.
Yeah. But I guess the more technology equals more data as well. More data.
More technologies means more data. The data is interesting. It's interesting to collectors of wine if they, you know, and it's interesting at the higher level. It's interesting to growers when they're trying to price their wine when they're bringing it to market. Data is always interesting. There are all sorts of shapes and cuts of it, but yes, there is going to be more data, and there are going to be more data-led decisions, undoubtedly.
Exactly. Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Who can I come to you? Perhaps your business is also, you know, mentioned earlier about how you've pushed e-commerce in 2020. What's your thoughts for the year ahead in terms of what you've learned from 2020?
Yeah, I mean, the comment on technology is extremely important. We are dedicating a lot onto developing our system to make it more suitable for what we do. We are talking marketing-wise as well. You know, how to be more present, you know, on the market. How do we show even more what we do with the, you know, the typicity of what we do on trade as well as private individual? How can we be more the visibility, how increase our visibility? And I think, you know, what to take from 2020 is really that it gave us the opportunity to find alternatives, and those alternatives are key and essential to grow the business. We want to be still present at the end of 2021, and we put everything in place in 2020 to still be there. And we are lucky to still be with a business, and e-commerce, coming back onto that, it was a platform with a strong necessity for us. Maybe not what we normally sell to our clients, but by the fact that you have visibility on the platform that people can come to, you obviously increase the panel of people that you may see. One of the important things that we didn't really talk about is also it gave us important time to look into who we had as clients and who we didn't look after for so many years, because you cannot look after 150, 1,000, 10,000 people just, you know, when you are one person. So it gives us also opportunities to look into more details on who were buying, you know, for example, Centenaire Mercure from us in the past, and actually why we haven't sold wines to those people now. Why, you know, we should go and see them. We should talk to them. So really 2021 will be to coming back to the basics, you know, coming back to what we are strong at, the base of our business, and continue developing out of that. A fresh start.
Brilliant. Okay, very nicely said. Nicolas, your thoughts on 2021 and what you've learned from 2020 and how you see them?
It's a bit difficult to predict, but coming back to what Hugues was saying, I think within the company we've been looking after our database and our client as well, and becoming more precise as well on how we deal with them, and putting using technology, and that will something we will action next year. We are far more aware today than we were at the beginning of 2020 of, I don't know, if we want to sell Langue et Nebbiolo rather than Barolo Cru, we know which customer to target and to not bother the other ways, for example. So that precision has been actioned. But I think I would like very much 2021 to see, I mean, in general, in the world market, maybe carrying a stability of pricing. I think fluctuation, and I understand, Louis Fabrice, what you were saying about 19. The raise of prices for 19 in Burgundy, it will be there anyway. So, is it the right time? I don't know. Some people will take it, you know, a raise of price on the Grand Cru, from the Côte de Nuit. There is no issue. People will spend like an extra 50 pounds or 50 euro on that. Will the raise on the village level or regional appellation level will be taken? It will be more difficult. But anyway, I think 2021, yeah, we all want all our friends in the on-trade to come back to a business as normal. That will help us all. We want as well to come back to something a bit more human, you know, to coming back to open bottle of wine, and hopefully that will happen. And that will be opportunity to present some less known appellation or coup de cœur or things we've been holding all to the for the whole year basically. So to Tirana, let's
perhaps next time we do this, we can do it in person over a bottle of wine, and
or two.
Or two, yeah. So, and Omar, for yourself, what's the feelings of Bibendum in terms of how you go into 2021 in terms of the learnings from last year?
Yeah, well, I think we've seen what we've seen happen in off trade, both independent retail and more high street. I would love to see those trends of more interest in Burgundy and increase in spend to a certain extent go up and continue. And I think because you've seen customers introduced to things that perhaps they hadn't drunk in that context before, I'm confident that some of that will stick. But as Nicola just mentioned as well, and for a business like ours, which is so on-trade dependent, I cannot wait for the on-trade to properly be back open and operating again. I think something that's been a real lesson for us is the importance of the customers you're working with. I think we've been incredibly, we're going to say lucky, that's not the right word actually. I think we work with a customer group who are incredibly strong. And actually one thing that struck me in that first release of summer lockdown was going into central London and talking to customers, and the 5 or 6 customers I saw that day, the majority of whom were talking about taking on new sites during this period. These were clearly very solid businesses with a long-term plan for expansion, for whom, whilst this was a setback, weren't looking at the situation in the on-trade as a reason to go back into their bunker. Quite the opposite. They were seeing it as an opportunity to grow. What I do see is there is so much pent-up demand in the market for going out, enjoying ourselves again, having that human interaction again, that when we all feel safe to be back out properly, let's say next spring, early summer, I think the on-trade is going to have a boom like it's never seen before. It will come from a lower base. There will be people who will not make it. We know that. Businesses that will not make it through the next few months. But those, as I said, those that are strong and that we're in a good place will come out of it incredibly strong, I think, and we'll have a really, really good year next year. I think there has been some talk about the whether businesses can afford in the sort of short to medium term to have sommeliers in the way they have done at the sort of, particularly the mid-level. At the top level, at Michelin-starred restaurants and 5-star hotels, that is always part of the experience. But you've seen that sort of, that level just a little bit down from that, where lots of places have had sommelier, and where at the moment I think a lot of those businesses are kind of going, is this a bit of a luxury too much? And do we need to simplify our lists and not have a sommelier? Now that could work both ways for all of us in the trade, but also for a region like Bourgogne, which is so complicated in many ways on paper. Actually, I've never found, in some ways I don't find Burgundy complicated, but to a consumer, all the villages not knowing what is can be intimidating. I think losing that presence in the trade, if that's what happens, will be a challenge, but it will put more emphasis on businesses like ours and like Armit, and to help those customers make those lists work, be accessible, and help them pull through those sales and introduce those appellations that will work in that sort of environment. I think that's going to be a big thing for us next year, is really supporting the customers in their reopening, both in the sense of what they list, but also how they then go through to sell it. And I think if we do that well, then I think what we were talking about earlier on about the slightly lesser known appellations in Burgundy that offer perhaps some value that we're missing out on right now, that still has the opportunity to grow. So it's, as Nicola said, I'd hate to predict anything for next year. It's after the year we've just had out, how do you begin to take any faith in any predictions? But that's where I think things will come from. And I think there's a lot of opportunity, as I say, there's a huge amount of pent up demand. And I think that's what we really have to and work with going forward.
It's a very rounded view of the opportunities and also the challenges, as you say. So Louis, Fabrice, I mean, I'll give the last word to yourself. If you could perhaps just from your own point of view, looking into 2021 really, and how you see Burgoyne, and also just working with the UK, and where you see how you see the UK relationship developing this year.
No, I just would like to say that have we learned something from the situation and the COVID business-wise? I say we have all learned that we are fragile. Otherwise, let's come back to the good old days. We need to go to the restaurant. We need to taste. We need our customers to come. And I think we've seen that with the spring after the lockdown. I mean, business came back to normal in our relationship with people, with our distributors, with the tasting. So I would say, I can be wrong, it's going to be the same. I'm sure that in 6 months' time, we will have forgot everything we've learned from the COVID. And we want to see people, we want to taste with them, we want to show, and so we are going to come to see you. And I think what we all wish to do in Burgundy is to do a lot of visits. And I think I haven't been there for almost a year, and we are going to spend weeks, all of us in the UK, which is our #1 priority, and which is the biggest market of Burgundy, where there are lots of things to be done with some Burgundy lovers, with the trade which love us. So let's come back to the good old days.
Excellent. So it's a great way to finish this debate.